feminine has been raped all her life by her and by others. And so that's the relationship shape that unfolds for her. In other words, for her to have a really deep, connected, immersive experience in sex, the easiest way is to be raped. But she doesn't want to lose social status, so she's kind of pleading with me. Would you mind? Does that seem weird to you? She's pleading with me. I'd really like it if you raped me. And she doesn't know what's going on either. I didn't used to know what was going on. It's like, why? Why do you want to be raped? What's that about? Are you sure it will make you happy? This is what will make, yes, it will make me so happy. Just take me, rape me, this and that and the other. And it's where the flow is. So the flow is out of sync with the political correctness. And it's very, very frustrating on both sides because sexual flow is very, very alive. Both couples are drawn to it. I remember a woman laying in my bed who verbally, she said, I don't want to be sexual with you. And I said, I think we should end the relationship because I'm very sexually drawn to you. That's going to keep escalating. And I have no interest in seducing you if you don't want to be seduced. And I don't want to spend more energy suppressing this than relating to you. So it just makes sense to me to either intentionally move consciously towards a sexual relationship together that works, meaning you tell me what you need for that to be a healthy, good thing for you, or to disengage. Otherwise it just seems like it's kind of like putting water on a plant and then saying, I don't want you to grow. Well, that's going to be pretty hard. If just being around you is highly arousing in an escalating way, and you want to be around me a lot, and you don't want to be sexual, that's like putting water on a plant and telling it not to grow. I mean, if you don't want it to grow, fine, but let's disengage. Respectfully, meaning I want to respect your statement. What you're telling me is you do not want to have a sexual relationship. Well, she's furious. She said, "What? You can't just do that. You can't force me to have sex." I said, "I'm not. I'm really not. I like you. I'm attracted to you, but just as I cannot force you to have sex with me, you cannot force me to want to spend time with a very arousing single woman in a place where I'm single and not have sex, because I know that's going to escalate for me, and I do not want to be a pusher. But that's what will be created by that dynamic. So I think we should separate. And you cannot force me to want to be a pusher. I don't like being a pushy person. So I'd rather just be honest about that." Well, she was furious. Eventually, she kind of acknowledged mentally. And we had a parting visit. And in the parting visit, she was more flirtatious than ever before. She was naked. She wanted to take a hot tub together. She commented on my genitals. We cuddled together naked. And all the while, her words are telling me, I don't want a sexual relationship. And everything about her body, from the moment I met her to the very moment of our closing, is inviting that escalating that. And so there's a split here between the mind and the flow point. And I realized in that moment, because it was a very strong sexual urge laying next to her nude, I had a picture come into my mind. And imagination can sometimes create the point of maximum flow, not of maximum health, of maximum flow, meaning the way someone is available to be related to. This is the flow point. It's like there's the port that we want to have open. So like we're a shape, and this is our word saying, you know, so our words are saying, on a Sunday afternoon, 2 weeks in advance, could you call me like this, then do this, then do this, then after 6 months, then maybe I'd be interested in you. That's the word saying. It's a very arduous path. But sometimes you can sense there's a back door. And this is a completely different protocol. This is a backdoor ramp that says anyone who backs up into here and makes a connection in this surface can unload. This is the shape of the flow points of sexual energy. And this is where you have this phenomena of, we really shouldn't be doing this. This is bad, isn't it? Blah, blah, blah. In other words, it's not at all following the verbal trail. So she's saying, oh, it's not very good to have a relationship. I don't really want that. Yeah, I'm not interested in that. Maybe in 5 months, I should have the right blah, 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 and I just like talking to you. But she's leaving this back door open. She's seducing, arousing, whatever. And as I'm holding her, and she's in front of me, I know with certainty, you know, she can feel my hard, erect penis behind her. I know with certainty that if I just tilt the angle slightly and thrust into her, there will be a charge released that she's waiting for. And that her body will cooperate while her mind feels violated. Now I can feel this, and it's pairing with some part of me that's very atypical with my character, that sees the intensity of that flow. Now, what I choose to do with that in that moment, see, because you have a choice here. You can either enter the back door, trigger the sense of re-traumatization and abandonment because this wasn't followed. And see, this part, the pigeonholed left brain is not on board with this plan for some reason or other. And you can enter through here. And many men are satisfied with this relationship. I'm not. Because it is an underhanded relationship. It's agreeing to go through the back door. Now what's aggravating as hell is when the back door is wide open and very intense. It's like saying, when you're moving house, it's like saying, would you mind parking your truck up here, walking 3 blocks down here, then climb over this hedge, go over here, go over there, go over there. And it's like, well, why would I do that when I could just back up here and unload everything directly from the semi into the space in 5 minutes? Yeah, I just have a preference, silly me, just could you park 2 blocks away, drive, and then could you do just one package today and another tomorrow? It's like, I don't have time for that. Just unload everything. So my response was, I asked her, I said, have you ever been raped? Have you ever been, taken when you didn't want to be? And she said, yes. And I was not surprised because of this triangulation, because this is a very aggravating triangulation. Because on the one hand, I was saying, let's just let the relationship go. You don't want to have sex. I don't want to be frustrated. Don't worry about it. Find someone else who you either don't behave that way with, or who doesn't want to have sex or has all their sexual needs met somewhere else. Just be with them. And she was really upset. No, you can't do this to me. You can't just end a relationship because I don't want to have sex. I mean, it wasn't a very long relationship. We're in the first week. You can't just end a relationship, It's like, I can end a relationship. And if you have the right to define relating in a way that is totally frustrating and going to get worse for me, why wouldn't I have the right not to choose to relate to you? And this was very, very hard for her to get. So on the one hand, she's pushing to stay in relationship. And at the same time, she's pushing to be related to in a way that's very frustrating. So what am I going to do? Am I going to be very frustrated? Or am I going to say, okay, fine, you want to be related to you, fine, I'll fuck you. So she confirmed that she was violated. I was not surprised, because I thought, well, the typical man that is this chauvinistically treated and raised in this culture is not going to be concerned about the traumatic mechanism going on in this woman, and is going to, for whatever reason, say, she asked for it, whatever, and you can say yes. She's, sticking her ass out, nude, in bed, reluctant to end the relationship, commenting on this and that and the other, flirting with me, while saying she's absolutely clear she doesn't want to have a sexual relationship. It is a little bit of a tease. And I told her about the image. I said, the image I have is of grabbing you and thrusting into you right now. And the image and the sense I have is that you're waiting for that. But I'm not going to do it. Because I don't want to be viewed in this relationship by you or me as a perpetrator. If you want that, you are going to have to ask for it. If you don't, I want you to be aware that a percentage of men, unaware of the trap of this, or unable to regulate what they're doing as easily, or so chauvinistic they don't care about your feelings, or whatever it is, there is a percentage of men where if you do exactly what you've done with me, with them, and there's no reason you've singled me out special, and do this to, they will do what to your mind will be rape. But it's important to know that there's a bigger energetic part of you inviting and waiting for that than the verbal part of you that is blocking it. And that you're physically, there's not much more that you could do other than starting masturbating me that would invite this, meaning who you are, and so, in femininity, it's receptivity, it's softness, it's responsiveness, it's surrender, it's space, it's silence. So she's laying there silently, softly, spaciously, openly. The only note is this memory that she said, we're getting together for our last visit, that, I invited her to have a closing ritual because she doesn't want to have a sexual relationship. I thought a sexual relationship could be good for her. I don't know. But she acknowledged this back door. She acknowledged that I could enter through it. She acknowledged that other men had. And she didn't verbally invite me in. And I said, well, I'm not going to come in then. It's perfectly simple. My heart, my penis is very hard. I'm very aroused by that energetic invitation. But it is a violation to our cultural seat of power, which is the word. See, here's a very frustrating thing about being in this culture today, is because of the chauvinism and because of the left brain dominance, the word is primary. The word has the primary seat of power. In other words, a woman can wear a skimpy outfit. She can tease. She can make suggestive comments. She can rub her breast. She can play this and that and the other. And she can even say, men, they don't pay attention to women, what they say. They just fuck them when they need them. She can describe you as the abuser. And she can even say, don't you want me, and various things, please don't leave and all that. But she can also feel raped. And she can also say a few words. Don't do this. I'm not ready. And it's like, well, why are you doing all this if you don't want sex and all that? See, it's two different parts of her. There's the language part, and then it can be the abuse survivor. So it can be the rape survivor. In other words, this is the language conscious self, and this is the abuse survivor persona. Well, the abuse survivor has been traumatized. The trauma has been dissociated. There is a partition between the self. The abuse survivor knows that the only thing that she's valuable for is to be used and abused, because that's what she's learned. And she wants to be valued, and so she wants to be used and abused. And the conscious self is saying, please don't do that. I am not ready for that because I haven't had time to deal with that. But the abuse, particularly in alcohol, whatever, is leading the way. It's inviting a connection. It doesn't want to be alone. Because the abused feminine, in the man and the woman, doesn't want to be alone any more than the chauvinistic masculine wants to be alone. But it is alone. And so it's inviting connection. And there's a choice, and it's very difficult to know how to do this unless you understand these different layers. If you understand that the abuse is dissociated, which means that there's now two parts within the self. If you understand that no one took a stand in their entire life for their feminine self. If you understand the shame, the way women are shamed, If you've been raped, there's something dirty about you, not the person that raped you, something dirty about you. And no one else took a stand for that. That part then believes there's something wrong with them and may want to be raped rather than be completely alone and just never having a chance now that there's something wrong with them of anything else. They may want that, believing that. Whereas the conscious mind is saying, no, there's nothing wrong with you. You were raped, but doesn't have the skill to overcome the trauma. So now you have the abuse inviting the rape. And this is prime invitation. This is exactly what the abuser is looking for. So it's flipped in the masculine. So in the masculine thing, the language is, I want to abuse you. But what's dissociated from is the abused feminine in him. The gender is not important, it's the masculine feminine role. So in this situation, in the typical gender stereotype, the man feels, oh, I would just love to grab you and fuck you and da-da-da-da-da and come inside you and then just go home because I'm done. Which is the message, you, the feminine, are worth nothing. The scared little girl in there, the scared loneliness, you're worth nothing. I just want to have my way with you. And that's all I'm looking for, is some scared, dissociated part in a woman who says, I'll do anything, just be kind to me, and then you just fuck them and leave them. And because that externalizes, it flows all the shame that this part and this part feels over to this part. It also creates a peak pleasure of flow. The physical organs just measure flow if they're not moral, amoral. So there's this incredible flow. And on the other side is a woman that doesn't know quite what happened, feels a bit shocked, a bit dissociative, a bit disorganized. And it's a very, very vulnerable terrain, and we're seeing a lot of this coming to light, in the dynamic between men and women. It's happening in the spotlight with Fame, I think there's 45 fairly prominent men recently that have been dealing with sexual allegations and this, that, and the other. But what's important to understand for both the man and the woman is, number one, the first choice is sexual flow and pleasure trumping self-image, ethical self-respect, etc. In other words, if you want to, without doing any personal work, without any consciousness, with no consideration for long-term impact, etc., if you just want to have the most intense sexual experience you can have, as an abuse survivor, it will be recreating the abuse. If you were raped, just walk around in drunken areas, and if you walk by 100 gay, drunk men in dark environments and make some flirtatious comments, it's probably 1 to 5 of them that will rape you. And whether you call it rape or not doesn't matter so much. It's a reenactment of the abuse. And that's going to be one of the most intense sexual experiences, particularly if it's conscious, particularly if you're aware of your power, as opposed to just dissociating. I don't know if you know what you're doing. Because so much of the innocence and stuff that's captivated in that shame and all that is still there. And similarly, if you are a man with a deeply wounded and shamed inner feminine self, finding some permission for that in whatever, it's usually a dehumanizing way. So, well, they're a prostitute, you can do whatever. You know, whatever it is that's the dehumanizing, they're a prostitute, they're a foreign country, they're a tribal thing. You know, the slave owners used to do it with their black slaves. You know, that transfer of all that hostility to the feminine to someone that has zero value, and they might have 5 times the sexual satisfaction or pleasure with the quote slave than with their girlfriend, lover, wife, the most rich and famous white, you know, person around. Because that was a dance of etiquette and what's appropriate and proper. And this is not proper. This is me abusing you exactly as I was abused. This is me mirroring the inner shame and helplessness and despair. Because the inner feminine in many men is filled with depression, despair, loneliness, grief, shame, you know, sadness, frustration, let me out of here, loneliness, you know, just grief. So that's the choice. And this can be made, you know, this is made consensually with BDSM. I want someone to dominate me. What I want is to be raped and pinched and blah, 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 blah. What I want is to cut someone and drop hot wax on them and make them cry and tie them up and this and that and the other. And it's not about pleasure. It's about reenacting the nature of the internal wound. It's like I will feel as close to you as I feel to myself if you let me hurt you exactly the way I hurt myself. And so you'll be the feminine in this dance, and I'll be the masculine, and I'll describe exactly how I want to hurt you. And you'll show me through your face and all that how I feel as a feminine element within myself, because that's exactly what I do. I bind my feminine self up so she can't move. I gag her so she can't talk. I step on her. I do this. I humiliate her. I deny her. I, rape her. I don't appreciate her. When she says no, I enjoy thrusting in and conquering her. And I feel the power that I'm not going to be bullied anymore because I hurt her inside of me. And she better stay down there because I don't want the fear of being shamed and bullied because she arises. So get back down into that dark cave and don't come out. And I'll visit you, I'll keep you alive, I'll point at you, I'll poke at you, I'll fuck you, and this and that, and then I'll go out again. And this is dark material because chauvinism, in its cultural roots, beginning with the masochism of so many innocent people for gold and power and all this, and the whole lie of the religion and stuff. Because chauvinism is incredibly dark. It's one of the most painful wounds that we're dealing with. So the first choice is sex or growth. Because if sex is the clear winner, you don't care about your inner feminine, you don't care about anyone else's inner feminine, then, just play that out. And it can be done abusively, or it can be done consensually abusively. What I mean is, back to the woman who, I met her, we expressed some interest, we're talking on the phone, and it's like, I hope you don't freak out about this or whatever or anything, but what really just gets me on, and I don't feel fully happy about it, it's just the truth. What really gets me on is the idea of you raping me. This alarm bells go off for me, but I say, well, it would have to be, it'd have to be played out in a way that I knew I wasn't raping you, I was pleasing you. So there'd have to be a time, you'd have to spell out boundaries, it'd have to be at my house, this and that and the other, and then you could tell me how it was for you and that kind of thing. But that's kind of not going deep into the growth, but going into it consensually, which is a very important thing from my perspective, is to keep things honorable and consensual. But this is still choosing sex over healing. It's just consensual. The real light and growth point in all of this is using fantasy to explore, the most erotic thing I can possibly imagine is, groping a child at 8 years old, or, whatever it is. And let me learn from that fantasy. Let me say, okay, that's how my inner 7-year-old girl felt. My inner feminine was already being groped and pushed and tested and humiliated and patronized by the power forces around me, the masculine forces at me, looking at me, poking at me, commenting, isn't he cute, this and that and the other, and that's exactly how she felt. Groped by strangers, poked by strangers, dishonored, disrespected, unloved, an object, used for titillation, not for honor, silenced. My 7-year-old feminine felt gagged, silenced, stripped, and then beaten. When I tried to advocate for her, I was humiliated again and again and again. So that's how she feels, that horror, that shame, that loneliness, etc. So as I'm trying to open into my full emotional state, that's coming up, but that's too big for me to deal with. I don't want to feel the grief, the horror of that. So instead, I want to play that out with this other person where she's in that role, in a fantasy or in a consensual thing. And then this can lead to then a question. Why does she feel that way? In other words, fantasies don't lie. If your highest charge is beating this and that, hurting this and that, humiliating this and that, it is a reality that is how that feminine part at that age, where you have the optimal age, is feeling at this time, meaning it's not been changed. That's where the juice is. And the question then becomes, how do you analyze, not yourself, there's nothing wrong with you, but the culture. What was the setup that left you feeling that? What was the setup? What was the culture? And what was it made of? What was the gag? What were the whips? What was the candle wax? What was the groping? What was the this, that, and the other? How did that get communicated? Was it leering? Was it this, that, and the other? Was it looks? Was it comments? Was it TV? What was it that made that 7-year-old girl, that 10-year-old girl, that 15-year-old girl, that 20-year-old girl want to be treated that way? Or stuck, frozen, if it's a trauma that's dissociated? It may be an effort to try and reconnect with that part. In other words, I can't reconnect with that part in myself. It's so frozen in trauma. But I'm trying to recreate it with playing it out again with another person. We're there it. And I'm really identifying with how powerless and ashamed I feel to be a 10-year-old girl having all that happening in that way, energetically, emotionally, physically, in the media, in the looks, the whole thing. It's exactly how I feel, and I feel so much shame, so much horror around that, and I just can't get out of that. And I'm so swept into that trauma that I haven't dealt with that I'm trying to backlash and feel power. One of the traps of trauma is the feeling of powerlessness. One of the reasons we perpetrate the traumas that were done to us is to restore power, meaning if I can go from being the victim to the perpetrator, the medicine is power. The cost is shame, but the medicine is power. It's like, I did that. I know exactly what that feels like. I know what you're feeling. Because part of me has been living that in that prison my whole life. And now I'm doing that to you. And there's medicine, meaning every imbalance has to come back to balance. Powerlessness has to come to power. Shame has to come back to dignity, but if it can't do that, it will come to shaming. If you do the opposite, if you just flip roles, it balances out. But it's an unconscious balancing. I felt helpless. Now I've made you feel helpless. Balance. Terror was given to me. I've given terror to you. Balance. But it's an unconscious balance. The real challenge is I was given terror and I've given it back in a way that rather than just passing it on unconsciously, I realize I'm bigger than that terror, or that I know what to do to take care of myself. That's the real integration and healing. But this requires help. Why? Because it doesn't get stuck there for the most part without trauma. It requires help because trauma needs help. Trauma is an experience that is bigger than the ego, which means it requires more than the ego to ground, pass through, and pass and discharge. Trauma requires help. Shame requires help to lift the shame. So this is kind of what we're another way of saying it is that we as children and young adults were given a wound and given a shame, and now we're seeking balance by giving it back. And the question is, will we do that unconsciously by just passing on the abuse? In other words, treating some woman or some girl, depending on the age, exactly the way to induce the exact feelings that we felt at that age in that way, and thus kind of pass it on. Or it usually gets stuck in a loop, because usually if, as soon as we, rape a child the way we were raped or whatever it is, then there's a shame, like, oh my gosh, I'm a rapist, and one of the big mistakes we all do is we all take it on to us, as if somehow we're behaving this way out of nowhere, where the reality is that the culture is sanctioning a whole host of abuses. You know, it's the same thing. It's like, in order to be an American and be okay with napalming Vietnamese women halfway around the world that aren't doing you any harm at all, in order to be okay with that, there's no double standard. One has to be okay with burning parts of ourselves alive to satisfy the cultural dogma. And it is because we already did that, you know, we're not up in outrage about Vietnam. And the parts that didn't burn all of us alive are the ones that were up in outrage. The real work is to interrupt this cycle and realize you have a disease. You, America, you, government, you, parents, you, community, you all gave me a bit of this disease, a bit of this blind spot, a bit of this shame, a bit of this absurdity. And it hurt like hell, but I'm gathering help. I'm reading the books on trauma, The Body Keeps the Score, Healing Trauma, etc. And I don't want to treat my children that way. I don't want to treat my partner that way. See, now, as we come back to a healthy place, see, now the seat of power is in a healthy center where our masculine is honoring our feminine. And our feminine is delighted about being honored and coaching our masculine, love me like this and not like this, and thank you. See, and the feminine is honoring the masculine. Thank you. Yes, I love that. You want to, you know, adore me and be kind to me and just cuddle me close. Yes, I welcome the masculine, because there's a whole host of sociopathic women that when a very kind and innocent man wants to love them, they have no interest in them. Get out of here. You're weak. That's disgusting. You know, they do all kinds of little shaming things. You nuzzle in close and, oh, your breath is terrible. Oh, can't you do this? Oh, let's change the subject. And they don't flat out say, which would be very nice, I am going to punish and attack and deflect and ignore and shame and walk away and abandon every single nice thing that you do because I'm disgusted with that. I'm disgusted with my own inner feminine, so I hang out with men who are willing to abuse her as deeply as she deserves to be abused. Fuck that pussy. Spank that ass. She's a bad girl. Fuck her. Fuck her. I like that flow because that's how I see myself. Anyone who's nice to me is clearly inferior because I deserve to be treated like shit. You're treating me well. That means you're even worse than shit. So get out of here. So there's a whole group of traumatized, wounded, sociopathic women who actively, hostilely attack, shame, and humiliate the healthy aspects of the healthy masculine that honors the healthy feminine. Until either she turns him into someone abusive, at which point she'll tolerate him. In other words, if a nice man comes over with some flowers or whatever and she starts humiliating him, and little put downs and negs and complaints and, you know, you're not really my type. And he says, you know, fuck it, woman, I'm tired of this bullshit. Get your fucking clothes off. You know, it's like, oh, okay, you're willing to abuse me. Okay, you can have sex with me. And actually I had a woman in a very subtle way, and I really loved her. It was a lovely woman. But she wanted to have sex in direct proportion to my sarcastic jokes at her expense. So she gave me laughter, time, and sex proportional to my criticisms and put-downs, particularly in a humorous way. In other words, if I would be chauvinistic towards her, she had all the time in the world, and she always wanted to have sex, and she thought I was great. When I saw this, because I realized I was only criticizing her, I was putting her down, and she was rewarding me, and I said, I'm not really comfortable with all my sarcastic jokes at your expense. She says, oh, I don't mind at all. It's fine. I enjoy your sense of humor. And I started analyzing it, and I realized that, if I just said, I'd love to spend some more time with you, she'd say, oh, I'm busy, I've got to get at work. And then I would make a cutting remark because I was hurt. She was leaving me. She wasn't interested. I was hurt. So I'd make a cutting remark. And she'd laugh, and suddenly she'd have more time and want to have sex. And I realized I didn't want to be that person. So I talked to her about it, and she denied it. She lied about it. She said, no, that's not the pattern. I said, it is the pattern. You're the only one that I talk horribly to. I don't like it. It's confusing me about what love is. And of course, it wasn't love. She'd been traumatized as a child into feeling helpless and worthless and foolish and stupid and this and that and the other. And some part of her, 3 to 5 year old is totally lost in that wound. And the way she gets a sense of power as an adult is by doing that to herself. And the way that someone connects deepest with her is to do that to her. And there's some part of her that trains it and likes it and rewards it and denies that she's doing it. And so it's kind of, and I said basically, you are doing it. It is changing who I am, not for the better. I don't want to be this person. And I would like you to do therapy with me to see what's going on. She fought me tooth and nail. I said, I'm going to leave unless you do it. And so she reluctantly did therapy and still fought it tooth and nail. But this is an important thing to understand, is that she was willing to leave the relationship if it meant addressing the pattern of abusing her feminine. She wasn't leaving the relationship because I was rude. She wasn't leaving the relationship because it was long distance. She wasn't leaving the relationship because of all kinds of other difficult things. None of that. She'd go all out. But me fighting to honor her feminine more than she was and more than she had trained me to, she wanted to leave the relationship. There was something in the sexual flow and addiction and attachment about recreating that wound. And she was attached to the wound and the addiction more than she was attached to the relationship or me. And so this is where that anger by good guys who realize that, and there's this kind of aggravating tension where some of the, quote, hottest women like bad boys. So what's going on? Well, it's pretty simple. Some of the most hottest, cutest, beautiful women have been molested, raped, abused, humiliated, pushed, this, that, and the other. And it's a trauma, and it's gotten internalized in order to gain power. If you watch children abuse themselves in the same way. You watch children who are criticized a lot start to criticize themselves. Oh, that's just me being stupid again, when they're called stupid. And they're trying to preempt the abuse by abusing themselves. I'm sorry, I know I'm stupid. So, i.e., You don't have to tell me I'm stupid again. I'll do it to myself. Therefore, I won't be shocked and feel as helpless. Now, I'm internalizing the abuse. I'm being the abuser. I have the power. So I'm helpless. Now, with a woman who's being sexually harassed, raped, molested, and who's attractive, the I'm doing it myself is I don't want to feel the terror. I don't want to feel the powerlessness of wondering when it's going to happen. So I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to go out and find someone who wants to fuck me, and I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to say it's me. And I don't want some nice person. I want someone who I can fight with. I want someone I can be intense with. I want to be a bad girl. And someone comes along and gives flowers or is polite. That's not what she's looking for. She's looking to reenact the abuse with her in more control than she was before. And she's looking to punish the man to some degree. And so there's a trade-off. I'll punish your feminine, and you punish my feminine. I get to be in control, and you get to have hot sex fucking me in the same way that I was molested, and we'll drink and do this, that, and the other. And so, a very homely, dumpy woman is probably not going to be molested and raped and sexually humiliated and harassed and this and that and the other to the same degree. And so, there's a real phenomena. And so the confusion for the man is that nice men and abusive men, chauvinists and all that alike, are told, I was told my entire life, you're just interested in sex. Men are just interested in sex. Of course, that wasn't true. But when you're told that's what you should be doing, that's what you are, that's what you... Then there's some part that says, wait a minute, I should be interested in sex. This woman is more beautiful. She's choosing another guy. Maybe I should be a jerk so that she'll have sex with me. It works, fine. But is it worth it? Maybe. Just accept a lot of the hottest girls. And it does accelerate sexual education. A lot of the most promiscuous, hot women, and I've talked with some of them, are highly sexually advanced. I mean, prostitutes are sometimes amazingly sexually active. They know all the language, the ropes. They know themselves in that terrain inside and out. They're masters in that terrain because of their craft, because of their experience. So they can give more pleasure when they want to. They can explore different parts of their psyches, etc. So it's in a very amoral sense, not saying good or bad or whatever. Someone that's been molested has learned more about sex, knows things, understands parts of the psyche, sees bits of the shadow that other people don't see, can reenact that, can this and that and the other. And so, but I think the real question is, what about the little girl in there that never got to be a little girl? And she will attack a man like hell for being kind because he wasn't there before. But with patience and caring and respect and most importantly understanding the terrain and basically saying, fine, if you want a bad, if you want someone who will abuse you, there's plenty of people who will. Go be with them. But if you want a friend, you want to, then I'm not going to abuse you, and I will see you as a human being. And that can be a much more satisfying relationship. But that's why I say you have your first choice is, maximizing sex or focusing on growth and and transformation. And I think it's ultimately a lot more satisfying to be conscious and could expand, because one of the interesting and kind of sad elements of the abuse pattern, let's say 7-year-old or 8-year-old or 14-year-old innocence is destroyed, meaning that the inner feminine in the man, by the time he's 14-year-old, is just trashed. And so he's really drawn to 13-year-old girls who haven't lost that innocence and that correspond with that part in him. Well, if it's an unconscious draw and he has no idea what this whole terrain is, he's going to be so drawn and in love and infatuated with that 13-year-old girl. He's going to go back there and this and that and the other. And if perchance he has the opportunity to be sexual with that 13-year-old girl, he will destroy the innocence, the trust, the beauty in that 13-year-old girl and confuse her. As soon as he's done that, he loses all interest in her, because now she is as abused as him. So he's not attracted. So he's attracted back to the next person who hasn't been destroyed by him. So the very pattern that draws him is the pattern that destroys it. And it's far more satisfying to help someone who's had their innocence destroyed regain it, and then have it for a lifetime, where it's like, it's there because it's honored. I'm going to put your safety, your beauty, your trust, your innocence first. And then watch it grow. And then learn from you how to heal mine. Because if I can be kind to your 14-year-old feminine, I can be kind to my own. And so that's kind of the path of healing, of how to honor the wounded feminine in a woman, in a man, deeply and fully, and really listen and invite it. When it says, no, you don't want to worry about this. My girlfriend sometimes says, fine, you can go out and have sex with a masseuse or whatever, you just don't tell me about it. That's an older part of her talking. Her younger part is quite upset at the idea. So I say, no, I'm not going to. I want to hear all your feelings. I want to know your ages. How are you at 4 years old, around this and that. 4 and 6-year-olds, they never want that. And I put them first. And my girlfriend's 4 and 6-year-old get to see that they're number one again and again, and cared about again and again. And her innocence and her magic and her beauty just blossoms and blossoms and blossoms. And I get showered with that adoration that many women and many men do not have access to, because it has been so decimated by the cultural chauvinism. And that's where the magic lies. And so on the, my chauvinist, my addict, says, gosh, I guess you're taking all the fun in life out, it's like, oh, it's nothing there. I could be having sex with this and that and that, and here I am. That's the inner chauvinist and the addict. What I discover the more I do that is how deeply satisfied I am, in a way that no amount of betrayals, no amount of abandonment, no amount of transferring shame and abuse can bring sustainably. It's fine for the rush. There's a tremendous rush for the masculine and the wounded feminine, in going out and recreating the same inner abuse with someone else. And particularly if you can give the shame to them. It's like, you let me treat you so shittily that all the crappy shame that I carried, that told me I was a piece of shit because someone treated me that way, you let me treat you that way. And now I know you're even more shitty than me. Wow. Plus it was a great orgasm and all that. And this is an amoral rush. I mean, it's nothing to do with what the conscious mind may say. And the conscious mind saying is what went on here? She said that was fine. You did it. It felt great. What went on? And so this is why I'm making this video. Is no one has ever explained any of this to me, and it's very, very confusing at times to discover as a man that you're supposed to be interested in sex, and what seems to be the most interesting or exciting sex is doing all this weird stuff that for some reason some women really want you to do, but what's going on? And so I wanted to break this all down, and hopefully it's been helpful to you as it has been to me to say it and write it all down and stuff, and just bring more consciousness into the terrain. So blessings on you. The inner feminine is absolutely magnificent and beautiful, and magic and grace comes when we have a respectful balance between the inner feminine and the inner masculine, from that childlike innocence and wonder all the way up into the adult wisdom.